Birdwatching by Bobby Grace. Yesterday was too beautiful of a day to do much serious boat work. All of my projects are below deck right now. Engine room, steering compartment, generator bay, etc. I'm old. I don't know how many beautiful days I'll have left to mess about. A guy sure doesn't want piss away any of them working when he should be screwing off and messing about. I cleaned up the boat a wee bit, swept the cabin, washed the dishes, cleaned and refilled all the buckets. The normal daily chores on a boat. The chores were welcome breaks in the day, what with all that screwing off and messing about I was engaged in. The sky was in its pre-sunset glory. I had just put my guitar away and was fixing to grab a cold cerveza, move to the cabin top, and watch the daily return of the flocks of egrets to their nests. I've noticed most of the folks in my aldea pause to watch them too. It is a grand sight. Flocks numbering in the hundreds, one right after the other, fly by against the backdrop of the mountains, tropical red skies, the rich green of the jungle. There is seldom any wind that time of day. The water stands without a ripple, reflecting the colourful tableau and the brilliant white of the returning egrets. White birds, thousands of them. So many that it can take 30 or 40 minutes from the first passing flock to the end of the last. Sometimes they are skimming the water, so many that their passage creates the only ripple in the laguna. A guy can count himself lucky to get to see a thing like that. The laguna in which I'm anchored is directly in their flight path. These great masses of birds pass, almost silently, within a metre or two of my cabin top, close enough that I have felt the calm air stir with the flocks passing. Like I said, a guy can count himself lucky to get to see a thing like that. A guy can count himself luckier if he's got a cold beer in his hand. I went below to the chill box. Alas, there was no joy in Mudville. There was no beer in Tempest either. I decided to hop in the launcher and zip over to Texas Mike's place. He's in the egret flight path. He always has cold cerveza, and there's usually a few vecinos hanging about drinking beer, shooting the shit, and waiting on the birds. I washed my hands and cleaned up a bit. When I got there, sure enough, there were neighbors hanging about, drinking beer, shooting the shit, waiting on the birds. I sat down, started hanging about too. I was mostly just drinking beer and waiting on the birds. Texas Mike growled, "I've got to go to Peter Pan's birthday party," which would be an unexpected and unusual thing to hear a full-grown Texan man say anywhere else in the world, but here, where one of my vecinos is actually named Peter Pan. I just nodded and gave an affirmative catchy grunt. I'd probably have done the same, even if I'd not known Senor Pan. This is that sort of place. If a guy is going to live here, he's got to get used to taking the bizarre in stride. We have a lot of it here. Bizarre, I mean. A couple of hundred egrets went by. The sun got a bit lower in the sky. The beer wasn't measuring up to the majesty of the evening's show. I switched to gin and tonic. Gin and tonic is a fine and refreshing adult beverage for the jungle, and my personal regimen has kept me from getting malaria so far. I figured I'd drink my medicine, watch the flocking egrets, leave when Mike took off for Never Never Land to party with Peter Pan. I was thinking I may have left some messing about or screwing off undone. I was looking forward to getting back to the boat to evaluate my progress. I lit a cigarette. The egrets were just about all home, except for a few guys who'd probably stopped somewhere on the way home from work and were running late getting back to the roost. A couple of stragglers went by. They were a bit younger, maybe apprentice egrets left behind to clean up. Texas Mike fired up his Lanchita and headed for Peter Pan's place, which I think is just past the second star to the left and straight on till morning. I could be wrong. I've only been there in the daylight. I continued hanging about, preventing malaria, occasionally shooting the shit with the vecinos, watching the last of the egrets trickle by. I had about a half of a glass of malaria therapy left when a dinghy motored up to Mike's dock. Most of the vecinos had left by then. The bar population was down to me, one vecina, the cook, and the barmaid, who live in the back and are part of Mike's family. A few straggling egrets who'd missed last call downriver tried to slip by unnoticed. I sipped my gin and tonic, which, if you ever find yourself in the Spanish-speaking tropics, is gin y tonica. Long O. I don't think there's a catchy grunt or hand motion for gin y tonica, but when my Kekchi buddy orders one, it sounds like, Ginny toe nigger. So, me and Vecina are chatting, me sipping malaria preventive, she enjoying a Corona and a little break from her frenetic 2-year-old. The dinghy motored up to Mike's dock and tied off. A Chilean, who owned a sailboat recently, anchored outside the laguna, and an Irishman now living in Roatan, who was sailing with him, tied off and climbed out of the dinghy. They were in a partying mood, already well lubricated and intent on pursuing a night of hydraulic maintenance. The Chileno was wired enough to provide electricity to the Aldea for a week. Life on the frontier. La vida en la frontera. Chileno bought a round of drinks. I thanked him, finished my first, and tipped my fresh glass to him. He nodded, danced off, flitted about the bar, finally landed on the congas Mike keeps in the bar. The congas kept him busy for a bit. I watched him for that bit. He seemed a harmless enough idiot, speaking in tongues, banging the congas, every now and then leaping to his feet and dancing around. I turned back to Mivicina. The Irish dude was sitting beside her, leaning in. She looked a bit uncomfortable, but she's a lass of the world. She'd been living on the frontier longer than I had. I figured she could handle anything Irish could sling her way. Just to be sure, I scooted a bit closer to them, caught Vecina's eyes long enough for her to know I was there if she needed a hand. Chileno was back to wailing the fuck out of the congas. The music changed. Mike's girls were DJing via Bluetooth from La Cocina, the kitchen. They have a startlingly diverse selection of music for a couple of catchy babes from the village just downriver. The music passed through Punta, into some ranchero, out again. One of the legion of Bob Marley sound-alikes came up next. The Chileno had ordered another round, and my gin and tonic arrived on the coattails of No Woman No Cry, being performed by some off-brand huckleberries, fermenting musical injustice on the airwaves. The music changed. Chileno began leaping and pirouetting around the bar. I slid my eyes around the room, checked on Irish and Vecina. I caught a flash in my periphery and turned my head just in time to see Chileno airborne and pirouetting over the steps that lead from the bar to the dock. A couple of his bare toes found their way to the mooring cleat, paused for a moment, then gave up and followed him over the side. Irish shot to his feet, throwing his drink in his own face. He looked surprised, his empty glass dangling from his left hand, the contents down his front, lime in his beard, jaw hanging open. It seemed like several seconds ticked by, but it was probably only one. A lone egret flew by in the gathering dusk. Vecina sipped her beer, looked up, shrugged in my direction. I grinned, sipped my drink, flicked an ash. Suddenly, Irish burst for the dock, almost making it down the steps before a flip-flop malfunction sent him ass over tin cup to glance briefly, face first, then skitter to the end of the dock and over the side with a splash. I took a sip of my gin and tonic, stood, walked down to the dock. Irish was frantically thrashing around in the water, shouting what must have been the Chileno's name. Vecina, calmly, "Can he swim?" "Looks like it," I said. She returned to her beer. "There are steps over here," I said to Irish, pointing to the end of the dock. "I can't find the Chileno," Irish shouted a few times. I may have understood him sooner had his Irish dialect not thickened up in the heat of the moment. "Oh," I said. I glanced at Vecina. She glanced back. We both glanced in the dinghy. The Chileno was sprawled in its soft, inflatable bottom, looking surprised but unhurt. "He's already in the dinghy," Vecina deadpanned. "There are steps over there," I reiterated, pointing. Irish swam to the dinghy, peered over the side at his buddy, who was flailing like a turtle trying to right itself, made one attempt to board the dinghy from the side, but with the Chileno thrashing around, only managed to bang his forehead on the tiller. Giving up, he swam to the stairs and climbed out. "You okay?" I asked. A pause. "Yay!" he grunted, walked over, untied the dinghy, crawled over his buddy, started the engine and drove off into the night. Vecina and I returned to our drinks, enjoying the sliver of moon rising over the lagoon. The girls had brought the music down, soft, Latin, romantic. The sounds of the jungle night rose around us. A light melody of catchy conversation and laughter drifted occasionally from the kitchen. I heard Mike's motor as he crossed the lagoon from partying with the Lost Boys. "Good party?" I asked when he had tied off and came to sit with us. "'Bout what you'd expect," he said. "Anything go on here?" "Birds were good," replied Vecina. Yup, I said. Nothing out of the ordinary.